Okay, welcome back. So it's time to reduce the drum part. Not everybody who plays Rock Band plays on Expert, which is the part that we charted so far. Rock Band has 4 difficulty levels: easy, medium, hard, and expert. And Harmonix has provided pretty specific rules for how to go through and reduce the parts to make them easier to play for those difficulty levels. But it's not something that's done automatically by any stretch. We have to go through and make human decisions about how to do that, simply because every song is different. And the combination of the tempo and the density of the notes and just the overall complexity will kind of guide how strictly those rules need to get enforced. For example, there might be a particular rule for something that you would adjust in your chart that would need to be pretty strictly enforced if you've got a super fast song or a super complicated song, whereas if the song is really easy to begin with, then that particular rule might not be such a big deal. So there are a handful that are pretty strictly enforced across the board, regardless of what's going on, the things that you would just never do. And I'll be calling those out as we go through it. And then a lot of the rules really are subject to interpretation depending on what's going on. And that's why we have the forums and we have the discussion around the playtesting process as we're submitting the different drafts of our song to try to get them closer and closer to approval, is so that the playtesting community can push back if you're not reducing something that is in a way that's consistent with all the other songs that are out there that players are used to experiencing on each of the different difficulties. So I'll click into the drum track and you can see our expert part up here that we've authored so far. And what the reduction process more or less looks like is dragging a copy of that chart down onto the lanes for hard, going through and thinning out the gems in a way that's consistent with the rules, and then repeating that process for medium and easy. So it's pretty straightforward. Really, it's just a matter of getting to know what are the rules, what are the really strict rules, and what are the things that you should be shooting for. So the best way to grab all those notes and copy them down is to zoom all the way out using the little minus sign down here in the corner, zooming out horizontally so we can see the whole chart at one time. And then I'll just right click to lasso all the notes, and then I'll zoom back in so that I'm able to grab one note out of the whole bunch. I'll go back here to the beginning, and I'm just going to hold down the control key, and I'll grab this orange kick gem and just pull it down onto the hard kick lane. And because I'm holding down the control key, it's making a copy of those notes on the fly. And then it's just a matter of going through and starting to remove notes. Before I just start clicking away, let's quickly review the rules for doing a hard reduction on drums. When you're on the creator's site, you can click down into the docs, click authoring, and then down here under the different instrument parts, you just click drum authoring. And as I mentioned in a previous segment, I like to just keep all these instrument authoring docs bookmarked so I can just quickly jump in and look up one of the rules if I need to. And then you just scroll down to the section that you're reducing for, and that'll call out the rules for you. But again, because some of these are pretty strict rules and some of them aren't so strict, I went ahead and pulled out some of the rules that I thought were the most important ones to be aware of early on as you're learning. Keep in mind, this is not a complete list. Repeat, this is not a complete list. And by the way, this is not a complete list. So please read the documentation, and please do not post in the forums that you watched this entire tutorial and never heard of that rule, because I'm not covering all the rules. I'm just covering the ones that I think seem to come up the most often. There will be some rules that don't even apply to your song just because of the nature of the arrangement. So when we're reducing for hard, the first thing that we're typically going to look at is the kicks, because unless you have a really complicated song, reducing for hard tends to be pretty minimal. There's not a whole lot that you have to do. A lot of it comes down to the density of the kicks and how hard that is for a player who's playing on hard to typically keep up with. I'm not a drummer by any means, and so it's I know that's always a big challenging area for me when I'm trying to play on the harder diffs. So on hard, we're looking for kicks that have like 8th note or 16th note spacing. That's typically going to be too close together for a hard player, unless you've got a song that's moving at a really super slow tempo. So we'd be going through and just kind of looking for like double kicks and triple kicks that are going to be pretty tough to hit. A lot of times during a drum fill, the drummer would be hitting the kick one or more times, and so we'll typically go through and pull those out. I'll tend to leave the first one, and then if there's one at the end under the crash, I'll usually leave that in place on hard. On some songs, you'll hear the drummer using crash 1 and crash 2, sort of alternating back and forth, just to get two different crash tones. And you can simulate that by using the green and blue pad, but when you move to hard, sometimes one approach to simplifying your chart is to move those all to green or all to blue, just to make it a little easier. I ended up not doing that on Heartstrings, even though there are two different crashes being used in the audio, simply because I think right around that same part of the song, he goes to a ride cymbal, and it was going to get a little confusing to have the blue represent the crash one moment and the ride cymbal the next moment. So I just didn't choose to do that on this song, but you very well could. Requiring less hand motion pretty much has to do with moments in the song where you might be asking them to quickly reach across multiple pads or cross over their hands to be able to reach something. And we try to look for spots where the way that we've charted the part is requiring them to do that, and see if there's ways that we can either move gems closer together or uncross their hands. This next one refers to unflipping disco beats, and I don't have any disco beats in this song, so I can't really show it to you. And I've actually, to be honest, never had to implement a disco beat in any of my songs so far. It's a very specific thing that comes along every now and then, where just the nature of the drum arrangement requires you to sort of reverse the positions of your snare and your hi-hat for some or all of the song, to where you're actually playing the hi-hat pattern on the red pad, and you're playing the snare pattern on the yellow pad. And there's a particular way that you implement that I'm not going to go into in this tutorial, but it's pretty well covered in the documentation, and there are people on the forums who've had to do it a number of times who are probably better people to ask questions than me, but just to give you a quick sense of it, I'll show you what it looks like in an existing song. So even though it's tough to get famous playing Rock Band, you can certainly rack up your share of YouTube hits if you're really freaking good at it. So take a look at Run to the Hills, which is an old school Rock Band song. I think this might actually go back to the very first Rock Band, otherwise Rock Band 2, but has a great classic example of a disco flip going on in the chart, and this is one that came right from Harmonix, so just take a look at what that looks like. So you notice the hi-hat pattern is actually being played here on the red instead of the yellow, and the snares are being hit on the yellow pad. So then the last item here is related to your timekeeping gems, which are typically 8th notes or 16th notes getting played on the hi-hat or the yellow pad, if you've got more or less a standard rock arrangement type of beat going on. And for songs that get up above around 170, it gets tough for a hard player to keep time with that, and so we'll tend to go in and look at thinning those out. For Heartstrings in particular, I'm a little on the fence about doing that just because it's in 3/4 time. We've got high BPMs, but not, I don't know, it just doesn't feel as difficult to me because there's essentially one less beat per measure that you're having to play even though you're moving at that speed. So what I may do, and it's right on the verge, it's like 170, 175. I may leave the 8th notes the way they are and then just allow the playtesting community to push back if they feel like that's still too tough for a hard player. I kind of feel like they won't, but we'll see. So in these early sections here, these kick gems are probably about right for hard. Nothing really super difficult going on in the snare and the toms. So I'm just going to kind of keep going until I see, like here I've got kicks with quarter note spacing. That just at this tempo I might go ahead and thin out, so I'll just take out the second one. And I forgot to probably mention this when we were first taking a look at the RBN preview window, but if you want to see what your other difficulty levels look like, all you got to do is click the little label for the difficulty level up here. So here's expert, and then here's easy, medium, which we haven't done yet, and here's hard, which right now is still just a copy of expert, but that's the way, if you want to see what your easier levels are actually going to look like in the game, that's how you do it. Continuing on and looking for any more of those double kicks. I might thin out this hi-hat here. Here I've got 3 kicks in a row going into this drum fill. So I'll probably take out those 2 and then thin out that middle snare. Actually, I'll probably take that one off too. And I'll take out this first kick here, just so we're going down to eighth note spacing on that fill will probably feel a lot easier to play. I might leave these 2 together here just because it's such a pronounced part of the sound of the drums right here. I don't really want to have 3 in a row, but those last 2 feel pretty strong together. So I'll leave that and I'll just kind of see what it feels like to actually play it. Take out that kick there. And again, you're looking for opportunities to be consistent, so if you thin out a drum fill like we did earlier and then you see something that's the same or similar later in the song, you want to try to do the same thing to it that you did on the previous one, just so that the player can get to where they can sort of predict how it's going to feel. This part, for a continuous stream of eighth notes like this, I'd probably be looking to thin this out if there was more going on, but there's no kicks, there's no other toms going on, it's really just that snare tapping pattern. So I'll leave that alone for now. Then we get into the crazy tom pattern. So I'm going to take the kicks out of that so the player can just focus on their hands, since it's totally new and just a little more tricky than the other parts. I'm kind of inclined to leave these kicks here for now. Maybe take out every other one. I don't know, I'm sure I'll get some feedback on this, but it's just going to be really fun to play that part, and I hate to take all those kicks out if I can avoid it. So a big part of the reduction process is not just mindlessly applying the rules, it's also thinking about the flavor of the song and the flavor of that particular instrument at that moment in the song, and trying not to reduce it in a way that robs it of what the performer was trying to get across. So that's part of why I called this series Finding the Rhythm, is you're essentially trying to get at what's the spirit of what the performer is trying to do, and letting that come across even though you're starting to thin out your gems and peel stuff away, that whatever the inherent spirit of it was is still getting across. The nice thing is when you get a repeating pattern like this, once you've reduced it once, then it's pretty short work to go through and do it for the remaining iterations.